I've just seen Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, and you might be wondering why it's taken me so long to actually watch this movie. And the reason would be, I'm not a huge Christopher Nolan fan. I think he's a very technically proficient director. I think he's a very interesting director, though I don't think he's a very innovative director. If you look at his filmography, the only films in it I haven't seen are Following and The Prestige. His movies are all very grounded. They lean into realism, and that's okay. But what's interesting about that is that this is a director who's oftentimes tackled very fantastical subjects. And I find that his natural tendency towards realistic and realistic-based filmmaking kind of gets in the way of the ideas, the messages that he's trying to get across. Look at his Batman trilogy, which at its roots is at the heart of the undermining of the DCEU, through no fault of Nolan's own, by the way. And that's mainly due to Zack Snyder being a sycophant, as opposed to an innovator. But it doesn't change the fact that Nolan's filmmaking inspired other people to try to mimic his style, virtually dooming an entire enterprise. And that's not Nolan's fault. It is what it is. But he seems to be unable to go into the fantastical, the amazing, which is really weird coming from a person who directs movies. He grounds everything in a realism that works almost in opposition to the fantastical, the magical. And you see a lot of that in Interstellar. As I said, Christopher Nolan grounds everything in the real, the now, the realistic. Conversely, it's kind of weird that Interstellar would have been better served by a director like Ridley Scott, because it evokes images of places and times that Nolan doesn't seem to be able to bring across very well. Take a look at the opening of Prometheus sometimes. That would have been better suited for a movie like Interstellar. It needed that. These stark current landscapes that look almost alien. It needed that so much, and Nolan doesn't do it very well. He seems to concentrate more on the human, smaller moments. But again, we're talking about a spectacle of a movie here. But he seems to do better with the smaller, intimate moments than the larger, epic ones. Interstellar is not a very cinematic movie, which is really weird. I think it's a great movie. I enjoyed it immensely. And the way he's able to link different scenarios together and have it mesh is really fascinating. But it's not cinematic. I didn't catch Interstellar in the movies, obviously. And I'm glad I didn't catch it in the movies, because this movie would have bored me to tears. At least, I would say, the first hour or so. It's not that it's bad, but once it got its momentum, it works. It took time to build that momentum. And so it would have been interesting, not by any stretch bad, and I'm not saying that. Don't interpret it that way. Though I am saying it's just not. It doesn't engage very easily. And if you give it the time, you're rewarded for it. But it's just not immediately engaging. It reminds me of somewhat of Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049. No, it's not quite as dull as that by any stretch. Once that movie found its groove, it was fine, but it took a long time. And Interstellar is similar to that. The characters are engaging. Before they go off into space, it's fine, but I don't think it's enough to sustain a viewer until it gets its momentum. And when that happens, I guess around the part maybe when Matt Damon actually enters the picture, things get really interesting. But prior to that, it's fine, but it's not cinematic enough to keep you interested. I actually watched Interstellar in 2 parts. I watched the bulk of it yesterday, and I watched the rest of it today, and I enjoyed it a lot in that way. But to have to sit through this movie in one sitting would be, I hate to say, almost torturous. It just doesn't engage in that way. It doesn't feel like it was even designed to be watched that way, to be totally honest with you. And I'm more than likely wrong on that. It wasn't released in 2 parts, clearly. But it doesn't feel like a movie that was designed to be watched in one sitting. Its pacing, its flow, I don't think facilitate that. Break it into 2 parts. It's really interesting. And it pays off better. At least I think it does. I mean, I intend to watch this movie again in another few weeks, few months. I will watch it again in any case and try to see if it works in one sitting. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't. Interstellar is a great movie. It's a fascinating movie to watch, but it exposes a lot of Christopher Nolan's quirks. He wrote this movie also with his brother, Jonathan Nolan, who's worked on things like Westworld. And it's a well-written movie, to be sure. It confirms what I've suspected about Christopher Nolan all along. It's not that he has to make movies like the Batman trilogy grounded. It's that that's all this director knows. He cannot make a fantastical, strange, remarkable movie. He cannot do it. I don't think it's within his wheelhouse. And that's not, again, that's not a criticism. In a sense that everyone has things that they're good at, that they can or cannot do. Christopher Nolan cannot do wildly imaginative movies. Period. How do I know that? His entire filmography is an exercise in caution, in realism, to various extents. He cannot go balls out fantastical. It's not within his bailiwick. It's not. It is beyond his capability to do. And if you look at, let's say, Inception. Let's say Inception. This is a movie about dreams. Dreams, which are, I can't speak for your dreams, but my dreams are the strangest, weirdest, most fantastical things when I can remember them. His movie plays like a Bond movie for the most part. A movie based on dreams needs weirdness, it needs strangeness, it needs to be in constant flux. And his Inception, a movie again taking place in dreams, is the most undreamlike movie I've ever seen. It's just not. Like, let's say, I want to say Interscape. It's a Dennis Quaid movie. Maybe it's not Interscape. But anyway, it's a Dennis Quaid movie in which he has to enter dreams, I believe, to solve these, to help people and to solve these crimes type of thing. And that is more fantastical than anything in this movie. I understand that they were grounding it in reality, but this is all speculative. People have not been in a black hole. No one knows what it's like, or if it's even survivable for that matter. It's speculation. Be fantastical, be amazing. And Christopher Nolan doesn't do that in this movie. It's not canon. He does some interesting things. I'm not saying it's not. But it feels very grounded. It's not fantastical at all. It's fascinating in some ways, but not fantastical. And I don't think he can do fantastical because there's nothing in his filmography that suggests he can do fantastical. He can do very grounded, logical, science-based things. And he extrapolates slightly from it. But That's probably the weakest thing about this movie. And it's actually comparable in some ways to movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Oddly enough, Gary Goddard's The Black Hole from Walt Disney Productions. Except those two movies, sometimes to their dismay, could reach beyond what we know. It didn't always work, particularly with The Black Hole. But it was interesting to watch, at least, because they speculated in ways which were fascinating. Interstellar is a very good movie, no doubt about it, but it could have been so much more. It could have been amazing, and it's not. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Peace.